definitely are nesting right around here. Yeah, so it's just been a cherry tree. I took it at the beginning of May last year. Oh yeah, I was just waiting because I know.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming to Coffee and Conversation today. We are so thrilled to be able to do this in person, finally. Today, we're very happy to welcome Sean Kent, who's the Education Manager, Field Biologist at the Museum of American Bird Art for Mass Audubon. He's going to talk about the secret life of backyard and migratory birds, which is one of my favorite topics. I'm going to turn it over to him. I just want to mention, if anyone has a question, if you just want to raise your hand and I'll come over with the microphone. We are being filmed today by Walpole Media to be live streamed on cable and then to be able to access later on from other people from home. So we want to be able to hear your questions. So just make sure you raise your hand. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So I'm Sean Kent from the Museum of American Bird Art at Mass Audubon, and I also manage the education programs at the Blue Hills Trailside Museum in Milton, Moose Hill, which is a 2,000-acre wildlife sanctuary in Sharon, and also Stony Brook, which is about 250 acres in Norfolk with a beautiful boardwalk. And the reason that I'm here today is because about a month or 2 months ago now, I was doing a nature walk for the Westwood Council on Aging and their walking club on the trails here, and I just came in to say hello because it's such a beautiful site and a beautiful trail, walking trail right there. And I've kind of designed the talk here today for birds that you may see or may not see, but that are all around us, right around this area here. So everything that's in the talk will be right around here, either on the water or near here. And I'm happy to answer any questions and also shift to anything that I'm not talking here. So I was going to show some birds that have been migrating through the area to start off with, talk about the owls that'll be right around in the area, some that are probably perched right here when you walk underneath all the time, and then talk a little bit about bird migration and common birds through here. And the vast majority of the pictures that you'll see here I've taken myself, so I can talk about, where you might see them or what to listen for there as well. There'll be some videos and sound too. And I'm just really delighted to be here. To start off here, this is a picture of a Baltimore Oriole. This migrates and nests to Walpole in Massachusetts in the springtime, so it probably arrived about 3 weeks ago. And it's building nests and is going to raise its young here and then migrate back to Central America, and I'll show more about that. But I actually heard this singing when I got out of the car coming in here just 20 minutes ago, so they are right around here, through here. And then I just wanted to go through some pictures of some birds that you may think you see, that you may know or may not know. But this bird would have been on the walking trails here just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I took this picture in Easton at the beginning of May, when it's migrating. It's not here any longer. It's migrated further to its breeding grounds, further north through here. But this is a tiny little bird. It's a warbler, which we'll talk about in a little while. But this is a black and white warbler, and it runs up and down the trees. And it's looking for insects. I can actually just show you. It looks for insects that are in the bark of the trees through here and here. And it's just this beautiful tiny little bird. If you take a quarter out of your pocket right now, the quarter weighs more than this bird. Just to give you an idea of it, like the size and the weight right through there. And it flew probably 3,000 or 4,000 miles, 2,000 to 3,000 miles just to get here. And it's going to keep going. Or it's already keep going. And since you have the beautiful, the mill ponds and the water in the river, and I'll show more pictures of this too, but I took these pictures on Tuesday at Stony Brook Wildlife Sanctuary when I was on a walk with the Westwood Walking Club, and these are red-winged blackbirds, and I'll play their songs later on too. But these are really bold, beautiful birds. This is on the boardwalk itself right through there, and this will be just down where you've got the reeds right across the walking path there and then down towards the water. And these start to come back in March. This is another migratory bird, and they're really bold and kind of not afraid of humans or moving around too much, so you can watch them, and they're very amusing and kind of entertaining birds. They set up territories and they're fighting all spring, and I'll show the females through there. And then while these are around and flying, you're going to have these amazing birds flying over and soaring over the water here too. This is a barn swallow. So just down on the water and in the skies, you'll see these birds flying around. This is a species called a barn swallow, but we'll also have tree swallows and one other swallow species there as well. And these make little mud nests, but you can see the beautiful colors, and they're kind of metallic blue to gray to red with the sparkling in their eyes. And these are going to nest even potentially under the little walking bridge that you see over the water down there. And if you're just on the water, just wait and look. And if you see small birds flying really fast along the water, they're catching insects through there. And they'll also be in like large fields, so say over at the high school or in other areas at ball fields and stuff like that too, through there. And these are just pictures I've taken in the past 2 or 3 days, including this fun little bird here as well. This is another migratory bird. It's a gray catbird. It does really, really well in like suburban environments, especially if you have fruit trees or other shrubs and oak trees. And this actually sounds like a cat. I forgot to put the sound in here. At the end I'll play it in the trees, but you'll hear it kind of like almost like a meowing in a way, and it's very expressive. It's in a family that has a lot of different kind of song calls. But this is a bird that you may see in the corner of your eye, but this will be in a lot of yards, especially in Walpole, and I anticipate if we went outside, we'd be able to hear it within 10 minutes of walking up and down the trails right through there. And then these are my favorite birds in the springtime right here. These are eastern bluebirds. Does anybody have eastern bluebirds in their yard or nearby in their nesting boxes? So this is a picture that I took at the Museum of American Bird Art just over in Canton, where we have a field, a meadow, and they're actually nesting there. And here they are actually doing the nesting. They nest in old tree cavities. So they put nest boxes out like this, and they'll build their nest inside here. And this is the female. You can see it's a little bit grayer and a little bit not as bright blue. And it's carrying in, that's probably a caterpillar or a beetle larva right there, and it has 5 baby birds inside the nest right there. And it has to collect about 8,000 of those caterpillars in about 3 or 4 weeks to have all 5 birds survive through there. They need tons and tons of insects for proteins. And then here's the male leaving the nest box here with a less pleasant job right here. It's actually carrying out the poop from the baby birds through there to keep the nest clean, because just think of how much waste 8,000 caterpillars is going to produce. And I was sitting out on a concrete slab where our air conditioning unit is while I was doing some work for, my office was literally the field at that point because I was sitting outside working on education programs. And they would come to the box every 3 to 5 minutes for the hour that I was out there. And I just became part of the landscape, and it would even land near my feet because they hunt. They sit up high and look for any type of movement, and right when they see an insect, they're down and on top of it. Because all these migratory birds, here's another picture of a Baltimore Oriole taking off. What these migratory birds are doing, and I'm going to kind of show this, this is probably middle of April. I didn't write the date of the picture down, but end of April right here to beginning of May. What they're doing is, and you can see the lighter green oak leaves that I'm outlining right here, a lot of them are tracking when the leaves are coming out and when the flowers, this being an oak catkin, are coming out here, because you can see the oriole is going into the flower of the oak tree, looking for insects to eat, because the green world, when the world greens up, the insects come out and then the birds are tracking that for food, because the majority of our nesting birds, 96% of them, they need to collect insects to feed their young. So like bird seed, that's all great at different times of year, but their diet is almost exclusively insects to for their young to get the protein that they need through there. So they're actually tracking when the flowers are coming out and timing their migration through. That's why the middle of May is such a high migratory period, because the leaves are just starting to come out and the flowers are just starting to come out. And you can see this tiny little bird was just right outside my office window. This is a Nashville warbler, and I'll show them other pictures of warblers, but there's millions of birds flying through the state. And, if we went back to May 15th, I think 2 million birds flew through the state that night, and I'll tell you how and why we know that. It's an incredible number of birds that are flying at this time of year. And then you can see here's a chickadee, and you can see here it's got actually a caterpillar right in its mouth. While look at how it's hanging onto the tree. It's holding onto a leaf, a flower right there, and then the petal right there. And I'll talk a lot about chickadees, because chickadees are really common birds in your neighborhoods, and you can see them nesting and kind of understand what help they might need in terms of plants and stuff like that. But it's really a wonderful time of year, even especially just sitting out here and listening and looking, even while you're just having a coffee or chatting. Once you start to kind of recognize a little bit of like movement or even sounds, you may start to be able to see some of these birds, especially during that time in May. Because when I took this picture of this yellow-rumped warbler, this is one of my favorite warblers because it comes back early, so it's like spring is actually coming. Their digestive system's a little different than the other birds, so they can process a lot more fruit too. But there might be 60 of them just right outside right here, all up in the trees. And if you know what, even just like, oh, that's a sound, that's a bird song, maybe I'll look around, you'll see them flittering around. And when there's not many leaves out, they might be a little bit easier to see. It's just kind of knowing what to look for. So I'll talk a little bit about more of that later. But what I wanted to put in here were two owls that I think would be likely to be in this area and maybe even looking at you while you're walking through. See, you can see how this owl is looking at me when I took the picture of it. When I took this picture, it was actually being chased by a red-tailed hawk, and the red-tailed hawk was being chased by a blue jay. And the owl flew into the tree and landed, and the blue jay and red-tailed hawk kept flying through there. And this was taken over in Canton, and I'll come back to this picture here. But I took this picture of a barred owl, so I'm going to talk about barred owls and great horned owls here. But the reason you don't normally see the owls is because of this. I took this picture at World's End in Hingham about 3 or 4 years ago in November, and it took me 10 minutes to find the owl. So see if you can see where the owl is in this picture. And the only reason I found it, as you're looking for it, is because the birds were screaming at it. It's called mobbing, and there was all this activity, and blue jays were very aggravated, crows were very aggravated. And I'd say 6 times I thought I saw what it was. I couldn't tell if it was a fox or a fisher or an owl or a hawk. But every time I was able to get a good look at it, it was a tree bark or leaves or anything else. But if you look here, it's right here. The eyes are right here. The beak is right here. And if its eyes are closed, and if it was wearing a hat, it would look like that. Okay, and if it smiled, it would look like that. But what happens is when I saw the eyes open and then close. So this is an eastern screech owl. It's about this big, and I'm going to show a close-up picture of it now too, so you can see it a little bit easier. So you can see the eye there and the eye there. They're blend in so well. So when its eyes close, your brain can't even recognize it's an animal because it just puts it into like looking like a tree or just the background. And that's how it stays safe from other animals that might try and eat it, because it's only about a little bit bigger than a robin. It actually gets eaten by the bigger owls a lot. And it's also good for camouflage, so it can come down and get a chipmunk or something else where they don't even know that it's there. And then here, this is the same picture again, so you can see the two of them right there, and just up closer right there. So they're all, like these you probably walk by a fair bit. I've only seen them once or twice in the wild because they blend in so well. But here's a picture of a great horned owl. So I'll give you a second to see if you can see where that is. And I'm just trying to highlight that these are more common than you realize, and you just don't see them because they blend in so well. I mean, look at the camouflage there. I bet you a lot of you don't even believe me this is a picture of a great horned owl. I just took a random circle of the tree. The tuft is there, and the only reason I even saw it here is because it flew in and landed, and I was like, huh. I thought it was a hawk, and I just stopped and turned around to go looking for it, and then I realized it was an owl. And when I moved closer, it stuck its head around the tree to look at me. And you can see the close-up image like there, where it almost looks like, it looks very cat-like right there, right there. We have them nesting in one part of our pine woodlands at the museum, so I go and check out on it. And here's a much better picture of it that was taken a few days later, right through it. This is the apex predator of owls, really of anything in our environment. This is the great horned owl. It's about this big right here. Oh, and if you ever wanted, I do manage the Trailside Museum's education programs. We can actually bring a great horned owl here alive, too, and along with the other ones, too. You can see its talons right here. And I'll talk a little bit about this as well, where its two eyes are. And right nearby, which this is very rare, these two owls don't usually nest near each other because they're kind of enemies. This owl is nesting nearby, too, and this is the barred owl, which I'll talk about in a little while, too. But this is at Canton, and based on the habitat here, you probably have one, the other, or both right as you're walking along here as well, too. And I'll talk a little bit more about this one. And this picture I really like because I didn't see this owl right away. If you look right here, and it's also up here out of the view, there's 5 crows right here. And this crow is getting really close and squawking at it because the owls will eat the other birds. They'll attack their nest, and these crows will actually attack the owl's nest and try and disrupt them. So there's all this interactions going on, and the crows were so loud that it's a behavior called mobbing, where they're basically yelling at it, and that gets the chipmunks and the other birds and the blue jays. They all kind of police. They all kind of patrol the area when there's a large predator around, and they let it be known. So the best way for me to find an owl is when the crows get upset at it, and then it's around. This was on a rainy day back in March when it was setting up nests. But so what is a great horned owl? So here's a picture by Sean Carey of a great horned owl, and here's what it sounds like. Great horned owl. often duet back and forth, but that's the kind of the characters of the owl. Hoo hoo, hoo hoo, hoo hoo. And then here's some calls when they get aggravated. See? And they call it. So this is what the barred owl is doing, the great horned owl is doing to the other owls when they're too close. They make all these other different type of alarm calls. And here's what the great horned owl will look like about now, because they nest February, eggs hatch probably March, and this is a baby great horned owl. This might be more like July-ish, but you get a sense of what they look like. And here's one where they might look like about now. Here's another young great horned owl. So this is probably the age of the great horned owl in our wildlife sanctuary now, if I had to guess. And then I want to show you its powerful feet right here, where it's hunting right through there. You can see how large its talons are. And then I didn't take this picture, but I like it a lot because you can see what I mean when I talk about camouflage. And what they do is they change, the browns are all slightly different color browns like the tree would be. The whites here make it match like to the sky in the background. So if its eyes are closed and you run your eyes over this, even if it's out on the branch for yourself or a predator, it just blends right in. Like you have to have that kind of image of an owl when you're looking at it. So they're really, really well camouflaged, especially when they're tucked in tight to the tree. So that's good for hunting, and it's also good for just avoiding, say, the crows and stuff like that. But what I want to show you here, and this is really great, this is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and this is a nest down in Savannah, Georgia from, I think, 2015 or 16. I kind of want to show you the kind of what a bird's eye view, an owl's eye view of the nesting cycle here. So this, again, is in Georgia, and what I want you to look at here, too, is you can hear the calls. Watch the face of the partner that flies in. Now watch how the female starts to track her head in a second. Okay, so the male's going to fly in with some food, and watch how it's tracking its head. Okay, and it brings in some type of food, and you can hear the different calls they're making. And then the male's going to turn around and look at the camera. I want you to look at its face closely when it does that. Okay, see right there. Okay, and what I want to highlight there is I want to highlight this part of the face right here. So it's kind of that characteristic heart shape here, and you can see it better on the barn owl right here, but I want to go back to this picture. And remember how it was moving its face kind of like in a, like this type of loop, back and forth, that was as it was coming in? It's because it has its ear here and its ear here. So the ears are actually offset a little bit, right that. And when they're offset, the sound's going to reach this ear at a different time than it reaches this ear. And it moves its feathers around, and it can actually direct the sound into the ear. So it was actually, I mean, I can't say for sure, but it was most likely judging when the owl was going to land and where it was going to come in. But think of how good that will be for hunting at night with very little to no light. They can really access a lot of light the way their eyes are set up, but a lot of their hunting is actually done by hearing, with because the mice are below the leaves, for example. So they hear the leaves move, and they can fly, and they can actually figure out the distance they need to go and catch it without even seeing it, all based on the positioning of the ears. And they're basically doing calculus while they're flying without realizing it through there. And you can see that really well on the great horned owl there. And then if we kind of look at the nesting cycle here, so this again is that same nest right through there. And there's two owls in this picture. And this is from February 6th in Georgia. So here's the baby owl right here that just hatched, all white with its eye right there, right through there. And this is sitting on the nest. And this is an old, probably either eagle or heron nest. So February 6th, and now we're going to go to February 25th. This is 2 weeks later. So you can start to see, still mostly white puffballs, you can start to see a bit of feather development and color development right through there. And then we're looking at 2 months later, April 6th, where they're about to actually ready to fly out. Then, believe it or not, they'll fly out of the nest pretty shortly after this. And they'll stay with the parents for the whole summer. but they get out of the nest pretty quickly. But you can see how large they are, more full size. So 2 months. So if the owls here hatched in middle of March, this is approximately the size that they're going to be, and they'll be leaving the nest soon up here. This was 2 months. This is in Savannah, Georgia. Yeah, this is where they have a Nest camera that's hooked into the internet, so you can actually watch these live online as well from the Cornell labs. So you can see how large the animals are here, and I can pass along the websites where they're available too. So then if we go back to the great horned owl and the barn owl here, another thing, we talked about the ears and how they're set up for flight. But then the next thing is, I also want to talk about their wings and the development of the wings. So this is a BBC video from a few years ago that looks at the flight of a pigeon, a peregrine falcon, and then the owl. And they record the sound the wings make, and you'll see that here, and I'll tell you what that is as we're going along. So you can see the pigeon flies over the speakers. There's the peregrine falcon going to fly over the speakers here. And so and then here comes a barn owl.
And now, it's Kenza's turn.
So they're completely silent. And they're going to replay the 3 videos now and draw the sound wave that the wing makes under the wing beat. So you can see.
But what have the microphones picked up? The decibel waveforms show the sound being generated by the birds in flight. Each spike is an individual wing beat.
And so the peregrine, too, is the fastest animal in the world, getting up to about 260 miles per hour when it dives. If you look closely at the body size of the peregrine compared to the barn owl, you'll see a big difference.
But with the barn owl, there's almost nothing.
So even when the wings are beating, there's no sound.
Even our array of super-sensitive microphones fail to pick up any sound of Kenza in flight.
And here's the owl doing exactly the same.
And that scream call, that's their hoot. That's their normal kind of call, that like a great horned owl does, hoo-hoo. That's just the way they sound. So not owl-like at all. And then that's where the wings start to slow down right there.
That is really impressive, isn't it? It shows that they really are silent flyers.
So how does a barn owl fly so silently?
And this is really incredible how they show it here. They've been
When
flying
air
over
moves,
feathers.
it generates sound. The more movement, the greater the sound. The pigeon's large body and small wings mean it can't stay airborne without a lot of fast flapping. This creates turbulence in the feathers below. The peregrine has much larger wings, which it uses to build up speed and chase down its prey. The barn owl is far more graceful. Kenza's large wings and small body make it easier for her to generate lift. So just one gentle wing beat sees her gliding effortlessly through the air, creating little more than a whisper in the feathers below.
And so I just wanted to show that because it really gives a great visual on how owls are all of them around here with their kind of teeny bodies relative to the wings. And they also have special fringes along the wings that dampen sound. You can see it a little bit right there too. So they really will fly silently and kind of very, in a lot of ways, effortlessly through there while they're tracking their prey through their great eyesight, but really through their hearing right through there. And the barn owl isn't around here. The closest it gets is Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, but the great horned owl is very similar, and then so is our other owl that I want to talk about here, which is the barred owl. And bars, so like bars running across it, it gives it its name. And here's what it sounds like. Barred owl. So who cooks for you? Barred owl. And they'll duet back and forth. And then here's a picture that I took of it back at the beginning of April, right where you can see the maple trees coming out right through here. And I really love this owl because it's probably, the screech owl is more common, but this is the one that you're more likely going to see. And it's really strongly associated with like spring vernal pools, so small woodland ponds and water, but also it does really well in lots of different habitats. But again, they're really hard to see. This is a picture I took a few years ago in Canton on the property, and I don't even know where the owl is in this picture, and I took the picture. I took it because I was trying to find it and look closer at it, because when I went at another angle, it's here. And then this is a different picture that I took this spring. It's here. A lot of times they tuck themselves in tight into the trees and just sit and wait through the day. And here, because the great horned owl is close, I suspect it goes into really tight pine trees, because the great horned owl, believe it or not, will actually eat it and attack it. Like the great horned owl does not want other competitors around. So it's a very surprising they're so close to each other. It's really kind of neat through here. But the reason I bring this up is this is a painting done by Barry Van Dusen. He's an incredible artist. He lives in Princeton, Massachusetts, and he exhibits at the Museum of American Bird Art here. But you can see this is a painting that he did in the spring up in Princeton, and it's waiting and it's looking like this. And I like that a lot because it's looking, and this animal eats a lot. It's looking in the springtime for these. These are wood frogs, about the size of your palm, right through here. And these wood frogs, this is a picture I took at a vernal pool in Canton, they come out every spring to lay their eggs and to mate in these small temporary bodies of water that fill up and then dry up in the summertime. You can see this one here, and a lot of times they're competing over these wooden sticks because that's where they end up laying their eggs on it. Another frog that you see too, and I took this picture this spring here, are spring peepers. So this is actually louder than a rock concert when it makes its peeping call. That's why you hear them so much in the springtime. This is maybe this big, right through here. And what tells you that is this is a leaf. That's the end of the leaf right here, and then this right here is the maple leaf itself. So you can see how small it actually is. That's actually its blood vessel that you can see right there, and that's the male, and it's making the calls there. And they're coming into these vernal pools in the springtime. So this is in February when it's frozen, and here's what it sounds like when everything thaws. Every ripple there is a wood frog. So when I counted here, there was probably 75 to 100 in just this tiny little pond at the museum there. And so while this is happening, the barred owl is watching and waiting right here. And this is that picture that I showed you at the beginning. And what I want you to look at this slide is right here. Okay, and I'm going to play this a few times. We have remote cameras on the property that monitor wildlife activity, and I have this one sitting on the edge of the vernal pool. And that's a barred owl landing in the water and pulling out a frog. And you can hear the spring peepers in the background right through here. So the next year we put the trail cameras out, it actually started using the trail camera as a perch. That's the barred owl, waiting and looking. Oh, something comes in and splashes and catches it. And here's the next one, too. And if you look here, it's hard to see, but you can see its legs look abnormally large. That's because it actually has it almost definitely has a frog or a salamander coming out right through there. And it relies on these ponds. It also eats birds and other insects and also, chipmunks and stuff like that too. But it's going after a lot of these frogs that are trying to lay their eggs and mate. And here's what the eggs look like. And I'll show you salamanders too. But there's probably over 100 eggs in this little patch right here, and they're all tadpoles right now, right through here. And spotted salamanders fill up the vernal pool as well here, and there's a close-up picture. And on the night that I took this picture, I counted over 40 spotted salamanders in a very small area of a vernal pool there. So those are all active around here too with the way that you have the water. And what's really neat here is this again is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and this is up in Ithaca, New York, and this is from 2018. Barred owls will nest in tree cavities, like decaying wood, large holes within decaying trees. So they'll nest in owl boxes. We have a few of these on the property here too. And here they've got a camera actually set up inside where you can also watch. And this is their whole nesting season from 2 years ago. So this is what's happening right now in Walpole. Okay, and I'm just going to go through the dates because they're hard to see. So this is March 10th. You've got three eggs in there. And you can see there's a frog. That's March 16th. Still have the eggs, I think. I don't think they've hatched yet. Yeah, so March 10th, remember? Now it's April 6th. So you're looking at about 4 weeks, 32 days, 4 weeks later. And the eggs are starting to hatch. So this is 3 days after they hatched. So these are 3-day-old chicks that you're seeing right there, just little tiny puff balls. So you can hear the duet, who cooks for you? And then now she's going to call back. And they're probably changing the tone and inflection of the call and actually communicating a lot more than we perceive by changing the way that it sounds. And then, so we're at April 20th here, so about 2 weeks old. Now we're at April 30th, 3 weeks old. So, tired teenagers at this point. May 1st, you're going to notice a kick right to the face. So, kind of spot on for 3 siblings. Okay, and this is just a picture of all the different types of food they bring in. So that's a fox squirrel. But there's actually woodpecker feathers in there, blue jay feathers, there's snakes. Oh, here's the snake, yeah. But these are actually northern flicker feathers. That's a woodpecker that's from around here with the yellow shaft, blue jay. And now, look, it's May 8th, so 1 month, and they're leaving. That's and then look at the brother look down. Like, what? And then May 9th, May 10th, they're all out of the nest. Even though you can see they don't look like they're ready to be out of the nest, it's safer for them to be moving around in the woods than be stuck in that box. This is May 13th. And they stay with the parents the whole time, but, just imagine if there's a fisher or a fox or something, if it gets near that box and in it, it's going to eat all 3 owls. So they only stay in there as long as they need to, and no longer. And that's what's happening right now. Or what happened last month, and now the barred owls even here will be out through that. So that's what I have about owls. I think they are really backyard birds, but they're ultimately invisible to everybody. But they're always around. For example, I thought there was lint on my car. I was like, who put dryer lint on the back of my car? and it was an owl pellet with a mouse skull in it that they had thrown up in my car because it landed in my driveway on the wire because my 2-year-old and 5-year-old were pointing up at it. And I was like, who put lint on the car? And I looked at it closely, and I was like, oh, that's an owl pellet. It was either a great horned owl or a barred owl that landed in my driveway and then threw up on my car. Yeah. I was like, but I mean, obviously that's not as common, but when I was in Somerville and living in Somerville, and with the activity of flight and like the silent flight, every night my daughter was 6 months to a year old, we'd walk around the block. And I remember walking around the block and completely dead silence. A great horned owl flew out of a driveway right in front of us and landed right on the wire. Completely dead silent. Like it's something it was almost like it wasn't happening because it was so quiet. But obviously owls really do really well in the cities minus all the rat poison because there's so many small critters for them to go after. When I say rat poison, owls and hawks die a lot from eating too many rodents and other animals that are full of warfarin and toxins. So like there was 3 snowy owls this year that the Trailside Museum collected that had died because they were eating animals completely full of rodenticide, but like that. It's like the big black things that you see by buildings through there. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the black-capped chickadee, and I'll come back to this too. But here's what the black-capped chickadee sounds like now and later. So, sweetie, that's its like mating call. Sweetie, sweetie, sweetie. But we all know that they're called chickadees, okay, because of the call chickadee. But the chickadee call happens when it might see a red-tailed hawk. So here's this is a black-capped chickadee picture I took. It's actually drinking maple sap from a maple tree that's running, so that's the sap running down right there. And then here's a red-tailed hawk that's around. But when, say, there's a red-tailed hawk around, or here's a photograph of a coyote that I took at the museum, and then here's another young coyote through here. I actually didn't see the coyote right away. I was listening to the chickadees making this call. So that's the chickadee-dee-dee-dee-dee. So I'm going to play it one more time. But you know how it goes up and down like this? I'm obviously not drawing it right. They can actually change its tone and inflection and the way that it sounds. And when they do that, they're actually talking to one another and changing. They can say, this is a coyote and it's really threatening. Or they can say, this is a coyote that's not that threatening. Or this is a red-tailed hawk. And the chickadees will talk amongst themselves, changing the tone and inflection and cadence. So it could be chickadee-dee if you walk by. It could be chickadee-dee-dee-dee, lower if it's a hawk, or higher if it's a coyote, or something different. And then at the same time, the chipmunks, the tufted titmice, the blue jays, they're all listening and they're all communicating this and understanding the threat. And anytime there's a predator in the area, they'll do these alarm calls because they live there. But what's really neat is if this bird is in the area and that predator comes by, they leave. They don't stay around and they don't make any alarm calls because they're not resident birds there. They have a different strategy here. But the chickadees actually have their own complicated language with just that one song that actually changes depending on the threat and also what other birds might be present, so they're communicating through there. So they have this whole language through that, which is really, really neat. And so that's one. So those are 2 sounds that if you start recognizing them, you can listen to it and kind of be a little bit more aware of your environment. And chickadees are, especially if you've got a lot of plants in your yard that support insects, they'll be around in the yard where you can hear that. And then another common bird that you can hear too is a Carolina wren. This again is about very small, but it does really well in the area. And from February up until now, it's getting a little quieter now. It's really, really loud and you hear it a lot. And here's its call.
Carolina wren.
So it's a little bit like tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle.
Carolina wren.
But the key with these birds is they're really loud. and they're in your neighborhood. So if you start recognizing it just a little bit, you can recognize that they're around, and they're more likely to call more times throughout the year, especially in the springtime. And they live here all year. They're doing really, really well. And then a third one here is a tufted titmouse. So it's a whistle, a little bit like a cardinal, but it's a whistle, and it's Peter, Peter, Peter. Peter, Peter. And as the year goes on, it actually changes its sound a little bit, depending on the time of year. It's higher now than it was a month or two ago. And these are the other calls that they can make too. But these are also in your neighborhood too. And what I like about this picture is it actually has 7 caterpillars in its beak right here that it's collecting. Well, the picture that I took from its other angle, I counted 8, so it's somewhere between like 6 and 8 right through there. But you can see how many caterpillars it can hold in its mouth, and how important that is there. But that's Peter, Peter, Peter. And those are 3 birds, and I want to show a video of this bird singing so you can see it too, that I think you can start to learn their calls and add a little bit to. And did you see how it started to peck down? This is like if you have a bird feeder in the wintertime, it's actually got probably a sunflower seed right between its feet, and it's breaking it open to eat it. And it's also making the calls right through there. And those are just 3 of the birds that I think you can add from this sweetie and the chickadee-dee-dee. And chickadee can tell you a lot about what's around, or even just, hey, maybe I should look around. Maybe there's a hawk nearby, especially if you hear a lot of them. Same thing with blue jays and crows going kind of, they seem aggravated, just, I mean, to maybe not necessarily add a human characteristic to it, but they seem like upset that something's going along. The Carolina wrens are really bold and around. I wouldn't be surprised if they're nesting somewhere around here. Like if, for example, they could nest right in the eaves. They nest in kayaks at the museum and in canoes. They nest in a lot of different spots, and they're really aggressive. They don't like, I mean, most birds don't like other birds. These really don't like other birds, so they'll try and drive them off. And then the Peter, Peter, Peter is a simple song that you can start to hear and recognize here. And again, they're relatively common in this type of environment right through here. So then if we kind of circle back to our migratory birds and our bluebirds here and kind of think about that, this is a painting that was done by Charlie Harper, and this is called Mystery of the Missing Migrants. And we have this in our collection here. And he painted this in response to, he was an avid bird watcher. He's from Central Ohio. And he noticed a lot of his favorite birds, especially the wood thrush, were declining in numbers every spring. So he painted this kind of in similarity to Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, of calling attention to the decline of birds. And over the past 40 or 50 years, we've lost about 2 to 3 billion birds in total numbers in population. So the bird populations were about 3 billion larger just 50 years ago, and now they're shorter. But what I also love about this, it actually tells a great biological story. So you'll notice the moon here, okay, you'll notice the stars. Birds almost exclusively, most, migrate at night from dawn to dusk. Also, you can tell the hummingbird is little and really fast because of the lines he uses for the wings right through there. It's really neat. But so I want to talk a little bit about the migration it's basically over now, or basically in summer breeding season here. And this is a bird that will nest here, and I guarantee, well, I'm not going to guarantee it, but if you walk down by the water, this will be nesting on somewhere near those ponds and bridges right here. It's a yellow warbler. It's our most common, easy-to-see warbler in this area. So for bird migration, believe it or not, over 3 or 4 days in the spring, over 1 billion birds are flying through the country on just, one night, 350, 400 million birds, almost exclusively at night. They take off a little after sunset, and they fly until the next morning. And some could fly nonstop over several days, but think of this just like dusk to dawn right through there. And we know a lot about bird migration. You can have really accurate forecasts, which seems strange to be able to do that about birds. But one of the big reasons are the bird flocks can be so large while they're flying, they're picked up by weather radar, and you can actually monitor them through weather radar. And then there's very specific flyways that they have. that are important. So here's Delaware and here's New Jersey. This is an important migratory flyway. So believe it or not, here they have sound recorders that actually capture the birds singing at night as they fly over. And then they've got thermal imaging cameras that are set up here along with weather radar here, and they can actually relatively accurately estimate how many birds are flying over each night, because believe it or not, each bird, and these are all warblers, so here's our yellow warbler here, here's the Nashville warbler that I showed the picture of, the black and white warblers right there. All their flight calls are different, so when they're recording the songs, they can actually relatively accurately estimate who's flying over and actually how many of them are by how frequent and how loud the songs are through there. So last fall, on September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, 1 billion birds are flying through the country in just those 3 nights. In Massachusetts then, over 2 million birds flew through there. So where it's really bright, you can see where the majority were flying then. And so I've got a picture from this spring on the biggest night right here. This is May 14th, so just two and a half weeks ago now. They predicted 366 million birds. 450 migrated on that one night. Million, right through here, primarily through here. Over 2 million migrated over Massachusetts that one day. And all the pictures that you saw at the beginning, the vast majority were taken on that, like that time period of those days. And here, here they are. So catbirds started to come in on those days. Blue-winged warblers. And this again was just these pictures were taken in Easton, but just a kind of a normal suburban environment just like this. You can see this one, which is a really great picture of how these birds are foraging. This is the yellow-rumped warbler, and it's hanging down this way to get into these cherry flowers and cherry blossoms. Its face and its eye are right here. And these aren't great resolution, but I love it because you can see the oak flowers coming out and the oak leaves just starting to come out. And then watch what the bird does. It pokes into the leaf, and if you look, it's very hard to see, but it's actually got a caterpillar in its mouth. And you couldn't even see it in there. So this right here could have 30 caterpillars just tucked into this one part of the branch. If you want to save birds, plant an oak tree, as an example, or plant like a native dogwood or blueberries, because they're such great food sources for moths, like caterpillars and moths, and it really supports birds. And then here's a better close-up picture of the yellow-rumped warbler that you can see here. And I spent 15 minutes trying to get this picture because it was in the cherry tree. And for about a week, when the cherries are all blooming, I just waited the cherry trees at work to see what comes out because it's such a nice kind of capturing of spring with the flowers. There's a maple that's nearby that's coming out, and just what these birds really need through here. And then again, here's the picture of that yellow, black and white warbler I showed you, and it's hanging upside down going into the leaf through there. But these were all just in Canton and Easton over a 2-day period and I was just walking along the trails, not really looking. I was looking for them, but this was over maybe a half an hour to an hour while I was walking. And I was really lucky to get, this is a rare warbler called a Nashville warbler. But what I loved about this is it shows what it's actually doing. See how its beak's in the cherry flower right there? It actually opens its beak up to spread the flower out. It picks the flower open like tweezers right there, and then it opens it up again right through there and comes through. And if we go back to the weather radar here, I want to show this really great video on YouTube. It's 12 seconds from a Miami station last February. And so you're used to seeing rain radar right here, so watch this. Okay, normal. Whoosh. It's not rain, it's birds. Wow. That's a flock of hundreds of thousands to millions of birds flying over the Keys right there. Over about, 1, 2, 3, so 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning right there. Flying in the morning and probably landing on the coast right through there. And it's just amazing to actually see that. So if we tie it back into the oil here, and its song, here's again spring photos, looking for insects right through here. Here's its song, Baltimore Oriole. So they're loud, they're sing-songy. you can mistake it for a robin, but they're really wonderful to listen to. They'll sing in the morning, throughout the day, and in the evening. But it would be easy to mistake it for a robin if you weren't sure, but they're just like lovely birds to see. So this is a map of data collected over the past 20 years by people like me or you, and then also researchers. But it's a project called eBird through here. And so it's going to go for the whole year. So we're in January now, where it's purple, so you got, Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Central America, a little South America, scattered spots in the United States, but mostly in Central America here. I'm going to play the video, and it's going to show how the birds move throughout the entire year, and I'll say what month it's in. And this is just for the Oriole to kind of tie in bird migration to a species. It's pretty awesome. So March, April, whoosh, June, nesting season, August, September, whoosh, October, November, December. And this is based on real data. So this is where people observe it, and it goes into a database that Cornell manages, and they're able to take all that data and make very accurate predictions, because you're looking at hundreds of thousands of records, so they have a very good sense of where the stuff is going. And that's what where the Oriole is migrating. So the blue is winter, the yellow is spring and fall migration, and the red is where they're breeding, right through there. And so that allows us to know when peak migration is going to be. So typically, and this is getting a little early every year because of climate change, between the 9th and the 12th of May is the best for Massachusetts on an average year. It could be a little earlier, a little later, depending on environmental conditions, but you can actually start to see when the birds are migrating through based on all this data collection combined with weather radar. And then, who thought people were recording night bird songs and then able to actually tell what was flying over without seeing them? So it's really, really remarkable through here. And then to kind of tie that into with the different birds that might come through, from, really beautiful ovenbirds here, and it sounds like this. Ovenbird. So that song is Teacher, Teacher, Teacher. And the reason I play this near the end is because when you're walking, you'll hear this bird if you're in woodlands here. The reason they're called ovenbirds is they build, like the Hatch Shell in the Charles River, they build these half domes, out of pine needles and leaves, and they nest on the inside of them on the ground. So they're ground nesting birds. But you'll hear these on your walks here. And here's another bird that you'll hear too. This is a veery thrush. And it's a beautiful song. Veery. And if you hear the two multiple tones at the same time, it has two vocal cords that it sings a duet with itself through there as it's doing it. And the water right over there, the veeries will be there in the springtime, and you'll hear them. There's no way that they won't. But all these birds are migrating through, from the yellow warblers that I showed you to black-throated blue warblers, all different species, to kind of give you a sense of what's coming through. And then remember, they're tracking the flowers, and they're tracking the leaves that are coming out because of the insects that are coming out. So to close here, I want to go back to the chickadee that we talked about. This is a chickadee nest. They nest in hollow cavities of trees. This is in a nesting box. So this is a picture that I took a few years ago, and there's one chickadee that's a day old, 2 chickadees, 3 chickadees, an egg, and then another egg, for a total of 5 chickadees here. You can see the moss nest right through here. Oh, and I actually have a tree swallow and robin nest that I can show you once the program's over too, that I meant to talk about. But there's moss there. You can actually see hair, so there's coyote and dog and other animal hair in here. And then this pink material right here, it's really amazing. That's from fiddlehead ferns when they come up in the springtime. They actually go over to the fern and rip all the pink material off and use it as bedding for their nest. But here's a chickadee actually building its nest in the wild. And I bring this up because a lot of these really soft, decaying trees are on water's edge. And actually, did you ever know chickadees act like woodpeckers when the wood's soft enough? So its mouth is full of sawdust. You can see it's actually not the easiest job. You ever see a chickadee with a bad hair? Okay, so its hair is messed up. It almost looks like Shemp from the Three Stooges at that point, and it's flying out, and there it's gone. It's actually excavating the nest. And then here's a baby chickadee from not the nest that I showed you, but just think of the baby chickadee. Think 4 weeks later or so, and then just think for a second of how. Oh, I already told you. Sorry, I won't make you think. But these chickadees have to catch between 6,000 and 9,000 insects to feed their young. They have successfully fledged 4 or 5 babies over like a 3 to 4 or 5 week time period. And somebody asked me, like, well, how do they know it's this many? And believe it or not, in Delaware, this is Doug Talamy's research, he had graduate students sit in suburban yards and actually count the chickadees coming and going over a 4-week period, all the relatively accurate estimating how many insects were coming through. So they actually collected this data and extrapolated it. And they tied that into seeing if there were more native plants or more non-native plants. So like if there's more oak trees, the chickadees on average, I don't know the number off the top of my head, collected many more native insects and were more likely to have a larger fledglings, more fledglings by 2.5 times compared if the yards didn't have native plants in it. Because like a kozu dogwood tree, which is really beautiful and looks very similar to a native dogwood, supports 0 species of moths and caterpillars and other insects, where a native dogwood supports, I think it's like 200. Native blueberries support 250, native oaks 600, a Norway maple maybe 30 or 40 species. So they're just tying this into also like what a backyard bird needs to actually survive through there. But with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope that was okay. Did you want the mic?
Does anyone have any questions?
That is most likely what, the barn owl or the other owl, the horned owl?
If it's just hoo, it's most likely the great horned owl, or if it's lower and it's during the day, it's probably like a mourning dove, and I can play that.
Oh, I know what
too.
that sounds
Okay, yeah, then it's
yeah.
a great horned owl.
Great horned
Yeah,
owl? Okay.
yeah.
All winter.
Yeah. Yes,
What is the name of the bird that sounds like a cat in the tree?
a catbird.
Great.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
Yeah, so that was an easy one. Yeah, so that's this bird right here. And where is it? Let me just go back. There. The catbird right there. And so it'll have the black head,
Yeah.
mostly gray, and then underneath its tail and its rump, it's actually like a chestnut orange. Yeah.
One more question. What are all those birds that I see at Stony Brook in there? They're looks like a house on.
Yes.
Oh, it looks like a igloo. They look like
yep,
igloos on a big long post.
Yes.
What kind of birds are those?
Those are purple martins. So those are our largest swallow
Okay.
that are there, and they're pretty uncommon, and they're inserting colonies. So they nest at Stony Brook, and so they're mimicking gourds. Those houses, they're plastic gourds.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So if you go out there now, they'll be there. They're nesting right now. Yeah. The Memorial Day weekend was really hard on them because it was so cold. They fly to catch insects, so they couldn't fly for 3 or 4 days. So they had to, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Hi, at Diamond Pond, we have 2 hawks that come every year and wipe out the chipmunks.
Yeah. I believe
Wipe them out.
Yeah.
I mean, boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see them all scurrying, and then the hawks are there, and they're gone.
So the chipmunks are doing 2 things. One, they're either lunch or dinner or breakfast, or whatever that might be, or they change their behavior completely. And they're actually, the hawks aren't, they'll get some of them, but they actually change the way that they forage because they're scared. Yeah. And then it probably also will impact their stress levels too. And
They look like nervous wrecks.
Yeah.
Running around, Yeah, and it's because of those hawks.
Yep, it's because of the hawks. For example, I was at Stony Brook on Tuesday, Tuesday, and I saw a chipmunk. Well, I saw a weasel, so about this big, stick out of a rock, which I rarely ever see. And then I looked to the left, and there's a chipmunk sitting there, and the weasel disappeared. And I go, I wonder if the chipmunk sees the weasel. And the weasel then came up right behind the chipmunk. And I think the chipmunk got away, but I couldn't, because then I went looking to see right through there. Yeah, chipmunks chipmunks have a lot of things to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be a nervous wreck. Yeah. Yes.
Do hawks eat squirrels?
Do
Or
hawks
are they too big?
do hawks eat squirrels?
Yeah.
Hawks will definitely eat squirrels. Yeah.
This is what I saw in my backyard, in the wooded area. At the base of the tree, I saw a couple of hawks with their wings tucked in.
Mm-hmm.
They were sort of bouncing around, and there was a squirrel running around the base of the tree, almost like they were playing tag.
Mm-hmm.
They were not playing, right?
No. They were playing a very dangerous game.
They were playing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those were most like they could have been any hawk, but I'm going to suspect it was a Cooper's hawk. A Cooper's hawk is a mid-sized hawk, and they will actually run on the ground after birds and other like squirrels, especially if they're young and dumb, where they're not as good at it and they're trying to learn how to hunt. They'll have a red eye when they're an adult and gray wings with the bars on there. So it'll be a little bit smaller than a red-tailed hawk and other hawks of that size. But they do that. But that could also be a red-tailed or like a red-shouldered hawk too. But I'm going to guess it was probably a couple of Cooper's hawks doing it.
Well, it looked
Yeah.
adorable, and I
Yeah.
thought, wow, how cute that is. They're
Yeah.
playing with each other, but
Yeah.
they were
No. Well, you never know, but I would suspect not. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Now,
Yeah.
our hawks just swoop down and up, down and up. That's all they do.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Never
they're-
seen them on the ground.
So they're riding the thermals. So they're changing they're able to basically fly for free on the differences between the hot and the cold, and they're just soaring through there, and they'll eventually die, but they'll just spend hours doing that.
Well, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Oh yeah, I just have I brought some birds' nests in case people wanted to see them too, but I can answer the questions. But this is a robin's nest because I know robins are really common through here, and this is built with a mud wall and then really kind of anything on the outside, and then if you look at the inside, this is a little bit damaged on the inside. It's a little bit softer. Is it okay to pass things around?
Did you have a different question?
You want to take a closer look at that?
I think you said 2 billion birds had died in the past 50 years.
The population is 2 billion lower. Yeah, so I don't know what the number is, but they found that there's 2 billion fewer birds each year than there were about 40 or 50 years ago.
What's the cause of that, and
So-
what harm is that, and what can we do to
So it's a lot of
prevent
different
that?
it's a lot of different things that's causing the bird decline. So habitat destruction and the conversion of natural habitat into homes, businesses, and stuff like that. And that's why at the end, the part was what